can go ahead.
Okay, I just start over. Okay. My name is Haley Hunter, and my group members are Nicole Brown, Tara P., Kevin Shelton, and Emily Switzer. Next. We are presenting our behavior change project over a study by Washington, Bana, and Gibson that focus on increasing physical activity levels in healthy adults by using prize-based contingencies as a source of reinforcement. To get a better understanding on how this study was conducted, we researched other studies referenced within our current study. All studies used interventions focused on helping increase physical activity levels in adults and children. Physical activity was being tracked with some form of pedometer, just like our replication study. The study done by Petrie, Berry, and Pescatella and White focused on weight loss in obese or overweight adults by using low-cost incentives as reinforcement. Husty, Norman, and Larson discussed how their study measured the changes in physical activity of children by using reversal design. Spring, Schneider, McFadden, Vaughn, Kozak, Smith, and Lloyd-Jones conducted a study that used remote coaching, mobile technology, and financial incentives to help maximize improvement in diet and activity levels. Even though P. Norman's study didn't involve prizes as a type of reinforcement, it still used self-monitoring, goal setting, and feedback to increase adult physical activity. The Andrada, Berry, Litt, and Petrie study used a reinforcement thinning schedule to encourage participants to reach more than 10,000 steps. All of these studies discussed within our replication project used low-cost interventions to help increase weight loss by also increasing physical activity levels in adults and children. Now here is Tara to discuss the scientific purpose of our study.
The purpose of this study is to determine how low cost and easily accessible interventions can increase physical activity in adults. Our particular study used prizes to see if it would increase positive, healthy physical behaviors. Here's Kevin with the first the method portion.
Okay, our method, the method part of our study, we had 5 participants. We had Nicole Brown, Haley Hunter, Tara Parashi, Kevin Shelton, and Emily Switzer.
So I'm going to do part of methods as well. The study required that we wear our accelerometer at all times, so that included all aspects of our lives, including homework, everywhere we went. Kevin?
The materials that we used in this study, we used a baseline questionnaire. We used a Fitbit or a smartphone step for the monitoring part. Then we had an activity guide or information to instruct group members on ways to increase physical activity. And we also used an Excel spreadsheet to monitor each member's daily step count, a phone or camera to show evidence that Fitbit app is being utilized, and then we had prizes for the prize draw. We had clearly labeled tickets with prizes written down, and we had a bowl to keep them in. We also used computer phone to communicate with the group.
So our behavior is stepping, and it's defined as stepping is to lift up and sit down one's foot, or put one's foot in front of the other in order to move the body from one starting point to an end point. So an example would be an adult walking from their car to their house on foot, and another example is an adult running on the track. Non-examples are adults sitting at the bench, on the bench at the gym, and another example is standing in line while waiting.
The data collection methods that we used, we collected data daily. We used the Fitbit or Accelerator app on the smartphone. We also went through 3 phases. We had baseline 1, we had treatment, and then baseline 2. All data was then transferred to the Excel spreadsheet. And here is our Excel spreadsheet through all interventions.
So the design was an ABA reversal design. So it included baseline 1, intervention, and then return to baseline 2, baseline 2. Each phase was a week. So baseline was a week and intervention was also a week. So the study was 3 weeks.
Okay, now we're getting down to baseline. Baseline was divided into 2 sections per ABA reversal design. Can everybody hear me? Because we had problems earlier. So I'll make sure.
Yes.
Okay. Baseline 1 and 2 lasted for 1 week. Each participant wore their accelerator or the app to track their individual steps during all waking hours. So there was even times at night that I went late at night so I can get my steps. We had the baseline data collection. It was based on the members' daily wearing of the Fitbit or the use of the app. Step count was determined and the number of steps required to meet goals for the intervention. Step count was also documented to compare baseline and intervention. The guideline for the physical activity, all the group members received a link to the 2008 physical activity guidelines published by the U.S. Department of Health, and the link is provided right here. These guidelines gave each group member information on how to increase activity levels. It also gave us strategies to maintain activity and charted our progress. It was also given, but not mandatory, but rather given as a helpful tool to teach for each member. The baseline questionnaire was delivered and filled out before beginning baseline and at the conclusion of the study. Basically, we talked about gender, age, verified weight, verified height, days per week of exercise, estimated exercise duration per instance, estimated inactivity per day, estimated required inactivity due to work or school, interest in increasing physical activity, or estimation of fitness level on a 5-point Likert scale. Our prize draws were determined prior to beginning of baseline 1. They were held during baseline as well as during intervention. Participants wore their accelerator each day. Accelerometer, I can't even say that, sorry, were eligible for prize draws for up to 7 days.
Okay, for the treatment phase, this was a prize-based contingency, so we had to meet our goal every day in order to receive the prizes. We did prize draws on Thursdays. So step counting, so determining the next day's count, it was a little tricky. It took us a little while to figure it out. The previous 7 days were ranked from lowest to highest per step count, 1 being the lowest, 7 being the highest. The 5th day of the baseline step count was determined to which count the person needed to reach in order to meet the goal for the next day. So for example, you have these list of steps, and the 5th one, which is 4,100, everybody would have had to beat 4,100 steps for the next day. So 4,101 steps in order to meet the goal for the next day. For data collection, the step count was recorded on the Excel spreadsheet, and we kept screenshots of our daily progress, and they helped with IOA purposes as well. The prizes that we used, they were small, medium, and large. Our prize bowl was stocked with 100 tickets at a time, and 50% of the slips had verbal praise, and 50% were the small, 42%, medium, 6%, and large, 2% prizes. So our prizes differed than the study's prizes. The study's prizes, the large ones were quite large, iPads and things like that, which was not feasible for us. So when a group member picked a small, medium, or large, they were eligible for a prize from that category, and we determined that a small would be a candy bar, a medium would be a large drink of your choice, and a large prize was a favorite cheat meal, whatever that may be. Emily's going to talk about IOA.
Yes, in order to get 100% inter-observer agreement, we utilized an Excel spreadsheet, and we also utilized our screenshots of our steps each day, so that way we could just see the screenshot and make sure it was what was recorded on the Excel spreadsheet. And it was broken up into different individuals, each being assigned one person. So Kevin monitored Nicole, Nicole monitored Tara, Tara monitored Haley, Haley monitored me, and I monitored Kevin. And we also made sure that we kept in contact via Zoom and text message and phone calls just to ensure that everybody was in agreement of the steps. For example, this was one of my screenshots. And that day I reached 10,149 steps. So that's what I recorded. Next. Treatment fidelity. To ensure that the treatment process was being implemented correctly, a treatment fidelity checklist was provided. Also, screenshots of daily steps were utilized to ensure that data was being recorded accurately. So if we go to the next slide, this is just a picture of the treatment fidelity checklist that we used. So it was broken down into eligibility criteria for prizes, which talks about the goal setting, the intervention procedures, just to make sure that we were utilizing those procedures correctly, and then the data collection procedures. So after we were done with the entire thing, we could go back and make sure that our treatment was being done efficiently and effectively. Next. And next we move on to the results. And I'm going to just talk about the results as a group. So according to our group results, the steps were increased during the intervention stages. Out of the 5 participants, all 5 of us completed the 21-day study with only minor technology issues, which Tara will talk about in the limitations. As you can see by our graph, there was no real stabilization in the data, and that was due to the setup of the study, since the study was done with set days for the interventions and the baseline. Our results reflect the results of the original study, actually fairly accurately. And that is where there was a general increase in steps during the intervention stages. Much like the study, a good amount of steps were below the recommended 10,000. And many of the lower points for both baseline and treatment were during weekend days, which is also a reflection of the original study and the original data. You go on to the next slide, which just shows the numbers for our group results. So the group baseline average was 46,171 steps. The group treatment average altogether for the entire study was 57,321 steps. And the baseline 2 average altogether was 54,329 steps. So on average, the group showed an increase in steps during the treatment phase and a decrease in steps once the treatment was withdrawn. Next. Again, this is just another copy of the Excel spreadsheet. It just has all of our numbers. Moving forward, the next slide shows the goals for each day. And we decided to mark the numbers in red as the days that we did not reach our goal. On average, most of us reached at least 6 days, some of us 5. But we reached our goal more days than not. And now we'll go into individual results, and each person will go over their own individual results.
Okay, so these were my results, an average of 6,885 steps. Range for the baseline 1 range was 2,000, so almost 3,000 to 12,000. Treatment average was about 9,000, almost 10,000 steps. the range was almost 6,000 to almost 18,000. I had a crazy day that day, or that week. Baseline average around 8,000 steps, and baseline range for the second week, 4,000 to almost 14,000. So here's a graph of my data. And she was right. So weekends were a lot less than I anticipated or even realized that I didn't take that many steps that day. So it was really eye-opening for me to realize that during the weekend I don't take as many steps. And the first couple of days of our treatment were hard to reach those big numbers. Put steps in where I normally don't. It does take conscious effort.
So my baseline one average was around 6,000 steps. My baseline one range was around 4,000 to 9,000. You saw an increase fairly well in around 5,500 steps for the average, and the range 4,000 to 7,000. My baseline 2 average was around 55 again, and then the range was 4,000 to 8,000. I saw an increase actually quite a bit in baseline 2, which surprised me because baseline 1, I did step a lot, and then I thought I would be more motivated during the treatment phase for all of our prizes, but I think I actually did better in baseline 2 rather than my treatment. I found it harder to get my steps in on the weekend, even though I was working during the week and on the weekend. I think I just struggled more. My days were shorter. I went home earlier. So yeah.
For me, my baseline 1, I averaged about 9,117 steps. And then my range was close to 5,000 to almost 13,000. And then for the treatment, I was at 9,666 steps, which I increased from my baseline by a number of 549 steps. But baseline 2 is where I did the best, which my average was 10,739, and my range was 4,407 to 13,957. Next slide, please. Like everyone else, I noticed that the weekends I dedicate most to doing homework, so I'm on my bed doing my homework most of the time. However, during the week, I work as a coordinator at a day program, and I am putting out fires, dealing with behaviors, and on my toes constantly. So that's why I get so many steps during the week. So here's Kevin with his data.
All right, my baseline average was about 4,200. My range was, man, it was pretty low in the beginning, 700 to 11,000. My average is about, my treatment average was about 6,800 steps. My treatment range was about 3,000 to about 10. My baseline 2 average was about 63. My baseline 2 range was about 1,800 to 95. And can you get next slide, please? I felt like baseline was, I felt like the treatment really made a difference in me. It's just, I think the praise, and I started feeling good about it, and I felt motivated about it. So really, I think the praise, besides not just the prizes, but the praise helped a lot more. I think just believing in yourself and feeling better, it helped me want to get back to walking more because I know I need it. So I feel like I made a difference. I mean, like by the time I got to baseline 2, I feel like I had some slow days, and like we were saying on the weekends, because a lot of times we're so busy during the week, and on the weekend we're studying. So on to Emily.
All right, thank you. So my baseline average, my first baseline average was about 7,200 steps. My baseline range was 5,500 to 10,000. My treatment average went up to about 9,000 steps, and the range was 4,600 to 10,000. And then my baseline dropped again to about 7,000 steps on average, with a range between 6,000 and 10,000. I apologize. So my baseline was not as high on average as my treatment, and I think it was less of the prizes and more of just the goal setting that really made it for me. I was more mindful of my steps during the treatment, and I really wanted to make that number. So that was what was driving me during the treatment session or times. All right, and next.
We found about 6 limitations during this study. The first limitation is that all of the group members did not wear the same data tracker. 2 of us used an app and 3 of us used a Fitbit. The second limitation was the availability for prize draws. We only met once a week, whereas in the study they met 3 to 4 times a week. And it kind of put a damper on our motivation to not meet as much, because I guess if you picked up, you were more excited. Also, our prizes were definitely not as amazing as they were in the study. I think we would have definitely upped our step game if we could earn an iPad. The third limitation was we were not available to meet in person to show our proof of data. We did it over technology. The fourth limitation is that Fitbit and step tracking apps do not collect accurate data. I noticed that I'd look at my steps and get in my car and start driving. I'd get home and look and go, wow, how did I move 20 steps? Well, I was driving. So it's the movement of my arms. And then another thing is I talk with my hands a lot. So while I'm talking at work and I start moving my arm, I go back to my office and I look and I go, what the heck? Well, there you go. The arm movement really ups your steps. So not necessarily the data was 100% correct. The fifth limitation is we didn't have a contingency put in place if someone forgot their data tracker, which one of our participants did one morning. And if our battery died during the phases or while we were at work and we didn't have access to a charger, we didn't have a contingency in place for that. And our final limitation is the stability of our data. Our data was not staggered. It was taken a straight 7 days a week for 3 weeks straight. Like we mentioned earlier, we all as a group did not step as much on the weekends as we do during the weekdays. And some of us, me included, did better during baseline 2 than we have done in the intervention. So I'm going to pass it on to Haley with the conclusion.
Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So the study that we had chose to replicate illustrated a prize-based contingency to increase physical activity levels in healthy adults. I believe this helped almost everyone's motivation as far as getting their steps in daily. We used the prize-based contingency included with prize drawings throughout baseline 1, the intervention phase, and baseline 2. These drawings were used in each phase to help as reinforcement for group members, as well as to keep us accountable for reaching our goals. We hope this behavior change project helps show how the study is effective and successful as it was for our group. And I believe we also had a lot of fun doing it as well.
Yes.
All of our group members contributed a lot. We had multiple meetings, and we worked a lot of hours a week just putting the presentation together and meeting and talking about research as far as the article and then the articles within our study. And here are all of our references. They include everything from all of our information listed within the presentation and all of the research that we obtained throughout our project.
All right, wonderful, guys. Do we only have a 30-minute window for Zoom, or is it 40 minutes or?
No, I have a full Zoom account, so we have plenty of
Okay,
time.
all right. I was going to say, I want to make sure I wrote down a few things. So I have a couple comments, couple questions. That was a really great presentation, and this was a neat study. I have one question. Did you guys end up just having to really do one draw? Was one session that just graphed a day or a week?
One second.
One session was a day?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then you guys ended up only really having to do the intervention, like, or pool the prizes one time, correct?
Well, it was 3 times, so once during each week.
It was 3 times. Oh, all right. So then that's another question, because there were prize draws in baseline as well, right?
Yeah.
So how did the prize draw in baseline vary from what the prize draw was in the intervention? Was it just the lower level prize for just wearing it?
Well, the prizes in baseline were just for wearing it, but they were most 50% of praise. Each slip, I made the slips, and they had a like a saying for each of us. So whoever picked it up were like, "Oh, go team," or whatever. And then it was like a small prize, like a candy bar. But there was very few of those in there.
Okay, and then in the intervention, it was the there was a different breakdown, right? There were also then the larger rewards that were available. Okay, that was, yeah, it's sort of interesting. Often in baseline, you won't see any form of reinforcement. And so that's why I just wanted to double check on how it differed from the intervention phase. Tara and Kevin, you guys made a good point about how your data didn't really go back to the original baseline levels. And I think it was something even that Kevin said is that, I got in the habit of walking more, or I was just, motivated to walk more. And I think sometimes with some exercise interventions, this is what you'll see. You'll see that it sort of becomes now a more regular habit. And so you don't see that reversal. Because even if you remove whatever the motivation is, the behavior continues. So at times you might see that because now you're kind of in that routine of getting those daily steps. One thing that I do recommend you guys do for the paper is actually break your axis along the y-axis and start with like whatever would be the lowest level number of steps that you guys have, if it's 1,000 or 2,000, because what happens is when you have increments of 1,000, you can't really see the differences very clearly between your phases. So you might have a difference of about 500 feet or steps or 1,000 steps, but it's difficult to see because your increments are so large. So do you guys follow what I'm saying?
Yeah. So smaller increments.
Well, what you can do, because you guys have whatever your lowest count is, probably around 1,000 steps, or maybe even 500 steps or something. You can actually you have like 2 little slashes, and it's called breaking your axis. And I can maybe show you guys an example, or you can look it up. And so then your very first number along your y-axis will be like whatever your minimum is like, 1,000 or 500 or something like that. And then I do recommend that you guys maybe do increases by 100 or or 300 or something, so that you guys can see a little bit more the variability that you guys had, because I think that there were some changes, but it's a little hard to see when your axis is just going up by, I think you guys had 1,000. Is that right? 1,000 steps? You might be able to make it a little bit more clear. Other thing also, which I thought was interesting, is does the study actually do an average for the group or not? Because I don't know if I saw that in there. I saw the individual participants, but it's like a perfect example of why in behavior analysis you don't tend to see group data averaged. Because if you look at the group averages, and I'm really kind of glad you guys did it, you'll see a baseline average and then a sort of a modest increase in the intervention, and then a little bit a lower in baseline too. But that doesn't tell you much about any individual participant. And so really, like, one benefit of doing single subject designs is that you get to dive into the variability and see, you know, for each individual participants, when it's all averaged together, you might have one participant who responded really, really well, and then several participants who didn't respond at all to the intervention. And when it's all grouped together, you have your data may give you some results that are actually not exactly indicative of what happened with the individual participants. And so, so a lot of times in single subject design, you'll stick with the individual participants' data, and you'll really go through that as opposed to seeing group averages, which is really different than a lot of other fields within psychology. But that's something that we sort of like about doing single subject research. And you guys were able to pinpoint, oh, well, on the weekends, didn't exercise nearly as much. And, you know, if you're looking at kind of group data averaged together, you won't always see that. One thing that you guys also mentioned, which I think is really good, is that how many of you used a Fitbit and how many of you used like an iPhone?
I used Fitbit.
I used the iPhone.
I use an iPhone.
Yeah, I've had a number of groups now who have had different apps that they've used, and the folks who had iPhones, sometimes they couldn't use their phone at work, or they forgot to have it on them. And so you would see like big differences in their data, because with the Fitbit, you're at least wearing it. And for folks who maybe have forgot to hold it with them all the time, you're gonna lose some of those steps. But another thing that Tara mentioned, which I also think is great, and I kind of chuckle to myself when I see the operational definitions of like what it's supposed to be to have a step recorded, because when it comes to whatever it is that's tracking them, it's whatever behavior you're engaging in that's going to track a step. Whether you're driving in your car or you're talking with your hands, you know, it's and in all these groups, they come up with like a great, beautiful definition of what a step is, but a lot of folks find ways to cheat. Like where they figure out how they can just wave it around and track a step or two. So I think you guys were good at pointing out that there are some limits to some of these fitness trackers as well. One other question I had too, because you guys have a slide that says waking hours, and then it has 7 a.m. to what says 12 p.m. I think you guys meant 12 a.m. Because it was probably 7 a.m. to 12 a.m. But what if some folks wake up at 5 a.m.? Like, how did you guys track the waking hours? I saw, like, on one app, it looked like it could show when you were asleep. So I was just a little bit curious about that.
So that's how we used it. The 7 or the numbers that were used, the 7 a.m. to 12 a.m., that was just a general example of what waking hours mean. As far as the group, we started taking track of our steps as soon as we woke up until we went to sleep. If we woke up in the middle of the night and we had our Fitbit on, then those steps were tracked as well.
Okay.
We just wanted to show that our steps were being tracked when we were awake.
Okay. Yeah, and then there was one other question I had about something. Oh, they have like the most elaborate possible way for increasing criteria. compared to like any other exercise study I've seen people replicate. But you guys, you only did the intervention for a week, so you didn't actually end up having to increase criteria, did you, for the project? Okay, and then who, I guess, I know you guys pointed out in your data, but I am kind of curious, who actually earned rewards? Did anyone earn them? Because you guys, it's all a lottery, right? So you could just earn verbal praise, or you could actually earn another reward, correct?
Yeah, it's a lot.
Did anybody get a reinforcer, or other than verbal praise when you guys drew?
I got a drink once. Mostly verbal praise.
I got a candy bar.
I didn't even make my steps, so I didn't get anything.
Oh yeah, so you now, and it was based on your steps per day. So you had like 7 opportunities to be able to. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and so you guys did point out that sometimes a stronger motivator may have made a bigger difference for you guys.
Oh heck yeah! If I could get an iPad, I would have ran around the
Definitely.
block all night long.
Yeah, no, and that's important to mention too in the discussion. One other thing, you guys did break down the steps for your treatment integrity about the intervention steps, but also you guys add in that section about how you guys monitored each other's behavior. You don't need to include that for the treatment integrity. I don't know if they mentioned that for their for their study, but one thing that we try to get across in this course is the difference between IOA, where you're really trying to get reliability on the dependent variable, which you guys mentioned, and how you monitored each other's steps, and treatment integrity, where you're trying to monitor the independent variable, which is exactly what the intervention was. And so the way that you guys break down the intervention steps, I thought was good. Like, you know, you showed what portion were the lower tier reinforcers and the higher tier ones, and that you guys did the draws, all of that, everything that has to do with the actual implementation of the intervention, you can count as treatment integrity. And then when you're talking about your IOA, then you describe your screenshots about how you actually tracked the steps. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I think that's just about all of my questions and comments. But I thought that, I was going to ask if anybody cheated too. So you have your little rewards, but was there anything about not allowing yourself to have those rewards if you didn't earn them?
It was more embarrassing not making your steps than anything.
Yeah, I kept saying at work, I'd walk in place saying, I'm doing the study. I have to get these going. I can't, you know. And people were laughing because they'd be talking to me and I'd just be like standing there, walking in place just to up my step.
Hey, Doc, how do you say your last name?
Cyverling.
Cyverling. Is it Dr. Cyverling?
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't say that. I'm trying.
That's okay.
But one thing about it, I tell you, the steps with the motivation, there was nights during the treatment phase. It was funny because I was taking my dogs out and I was still awake. So I went and walked in my driveway back and forth. It was about ready to start raining. And I was like, I'm going to break this. I'm going to break this goal. But it just kept motivating me because this treatment I didn't really need the praise or the prizes. It was just starting to make me change, you know?
Well, that's what, and I think your behavior didn't really go down that much in the second baseline phase because you were kind of like, perhaps self-motivated to just continue going. And so, you know, I think sometimes you'll see that. One other thing that some other groups have done in the last semester when I taught this course was the element of competition. They wanted to have the most steps in their group.
Yeah.
And that they found more rewarding than any of the other extrinsic rewards that were in place. And so, you know, sometimes, because they didn't want to be the last person in the group or have the lowest number of steps. So, so I think it's interesting. And then other folks, they just want to do well because they want to get a good grade in the course. And so they feel like they need to have their intervention work. And so they're thinking that if it's an impressive graph, then maybe they'll get a better grade or whatever. And so it just shows you that each person's you know, reinforcer varies, even within a group. So I thought that was sort of interesting. But anyway, this is a really great presentation. You know, let me know if you guys have any questions about my feedback as you guys are sort of prepping the paper for finishing it up. But yeah, we're almost there.